It is my great pleasure to have at least 5 minutes to brag to all of you about Trish Nash. Before I talk about Trish, I do want to get a sense of my audience. So if I might start by a show of hands, how many of you are researchers, know a researcher, or know what the phrase, the scientific method means? Oh, I'm loving it. A few, okay. All right, you're my people. As Mark mentioned, I'm an IBM executive, and I work within IBM's research organization. There are about 3,000 of us. And the scientific method is the way researchers, and actually now applied to business, go to make decisions and conclusions. You start by analyzing the situation, gathering the facts, having a hypothesis, and then making a decision. So no surprise, I used the scientific method to decide which candidate I was going to vote for the City Council. So it started with understanding what is the role of the City Council. And if you go to the website, you will readily see it is to provide services and resources for people who live, work, learn, and play in Henderson to improve their quality of life. That's a tall order, but that is the mission statement of the City Council. So then I thought, well, what is their purview? What are their decision-making authority? My first surprise is they have no jurisdiction over the Clark County school system. That point aside, they do have responsibility for deciding about laws, use of land, business licenses, and the appropriation of funds. So that led me to figuring out, well, how many funds do they have the responsibility for appropriating? The current general fund is $300 million. The current capital fund is $2 billion, responsible for 369 different projects. So now you step back and you say, okay, that's the jurisdiction, that's the responsibility. Let me look at the candidates. I'm embarrassed to admit that I took out an Excel spreadsheet and I literally layered in on multiple pages in my Excel spreadsheet each candidate's provenance, where they grew up, when they were born, where they worked, jobs they held, and when they joined volunteer organizations. I then went to another tab and I layered in what is their platform, side-by-side comparison. And then I went to the third tab and I looked at to see who is supporting them, both as an individual and as an organization. And the joy of this is that a fingerprint emerges. And Trish Nash's fingerprint is a demonstrated history of having fiduciary responsibility for profit and non-profit organizations. This is a huge responsibility. The second point that was made by Judge Stevens, if you look across her pedigree, a repeated practice of being an innovator, of being an inspirational leader, of being a collaborator, and when I say collaborator, I mean up and down a decision-making tree and across peers, and then being a leader of that organization. It's there in black and white. The third thing I looked at is, dear God, how did this woman do all this while she was working full-time? She is a master of time management. And I tell you, none of us have enough time, but somehow Trish is able to achieve these results within the 24-hour clock. Finally, if you think about it, what I've talked to you about is her hard skills. But let's stop a moment and look at her soft skills. Last year, she was awarded the Silver States Women's Award for Humanitarian Acts, an overt affirmation of her ability to apply her heart and her head to the call of her hand. That was my third to final puzzle piece, now the fourth piece. I'm new to Henderson. My husband and I moved here in 2018. So I'm like, you can measure the person's character by the company they keep. So who does she keep company with? The AFL-CIO chapter in Southern Nevada is sponsoring her, endorsing her. 2 business chambers, Vegas and Henderson, are sponsoring her. If you look at her government pedigree, she has city, county, and state leadership sponsoring her. And on top of that, she has academic sponsorship with a member of the Board of Regents and a prior president of the Nevada colleges. On top of all that, who's going to know Trish's character and caliber better than most, besides her husband? It's going to be her colleagues in the real estate industry. The Board of Realtors has put their endorsement behind Trish. As a result of that, it is without hesitation that I conclude Trish is not only the best candidate for the chamber, for the city of council, but she's the only viable candidate for the city council. So it is with that my husband and I have great pleasure to vote for Trish Nash.